So I'm Ash Huang. I'm an artist, author, and designer. I used to be a freelancer, but now I work as a senior experience designer at Adobe, and we are in my home studio right now. So when I say that I'm a freelancer, or when I used to say I was a freelancer, to me it meant a lot about controlling my own schedule and feeling like I could determine the projects I actually wanted to work on. So there is this feeling when you're working somewhere that you definitely have power over what you're doing, but at the same time, you do have to go where you're called duty-wise. And there is some of that as a freelancer, but I think as you get older and as you form a better network, you can kind of pick and choose projects as is interesting, and you can start to work off of potential rather than just need. So you can see a project that, I had a bunch where someone might have said like, oh, this is not an interesting project. But for me personally, I was like, oh, this is really interesting. Like, we can probably make something out of this. When I started freelancing, the main thing that I wanted to figure out was how I like to do things. I think especially, I went to design school, was in school all my life, doing things the way the teacher told me and everything. And at some point, working full time, I realized, I don't even know when I like to get up in the morning or how I necessarily want to work. So freelancing was a great opportunity for me to kind of figure out my own rhythms of how I like to work and, do I need to take big breaks and not be at the prey of like meeting schedules or so on. So that was a big freedom for me. I was freelancing instead of doing full-time work because I had a lot of other projects on the back burner that I wanted to explore doing more as my primary projects than doing work for clients. So I was writing my books, I was like teaching myself to paint and doing all these I call them prairie woman activities. So I was learning to read, knitting a bunch, planting a lot of plants. So I kind of wanted to get back to my creative roots in some way, and that was part of the exploration. To be a freelancer, there's the ethereal things and then there's the practical things. So practically, it helps to be really organized. For me personally, it doesn't bother me to go and do receipts or write down every expense I have. That's definitely an important part of it. For the ethereal things, I think you constantly have to be telling yourself, this is what to do next. You have to be very self-motivating because there really is less of the cheddar waiting for you where you're like, oh, if I don't do this, X person on my team is going to get mad. A lot of the success really hinges on you doing it because you think you should do it. I think you definitely need to know a little bit about business to not be stressed out while freelancing. I've seen a lot of people freelance who don't know anything about business, and either they learn it on the job. The first time I went freelance, I was 23 or 24, and I didn't know anybody, and I was just I'm just gonna do this because it seems like something I could do right now. And it was definitely scary. You don't know what to charge. You don't know things like how to make the client pay you if they forgot to pay you, how to check in gracefully and so on. And I think that it can be hard if you don't have a financial cushion. So I advise all new freelancers, I'm before you go freelance, make sure you have 6 months. And even that starts to feel kind of scary because there's always that feeling you don't know when the next job is coming. Even if you've had steady work for years, everyone I've talked to who's been freelancing forever is I don't know, maybe it'll just dry up next month. No one knows. And so you have to be kind of comfortable with that risk, but you can definitely defray the risk by saving up for it beforehand. And so that kind of alleviates business things. You can definitely make a lot of money freelancing. I would say if you worked as much freelancing as you worked full-time, you could make double. And I think that's always surprising, but the problem with the freelance money is when you get that check at your full-time job, you're all right, cool, put that in my bank account. When you're freelancing, we're all right, well, X% goes away immediately, and I have to go put that in a place where it's safe but not out of reach to pay my quarterly taxes. So there is this mental tension where the money is you get this fat check that you would not get full-time, but then you're I don't get to keep any of this. Pricing is such a dark art. The way that I would do it actually vary. I would charge people hourly if there wasn't much direction in the project, so if it wasn't well scoped, because that tends to just spiral out of control. And that's okay, that's part of the process, but you don't want to be stuck at the end of the day holding $0. So if it was not a well scoped project, I would charge hourly. Most people I would charge by project. If I was coming in 3 days a week or something, I would charge by week. When I was first starting out, I was terrified to charge anyone money. That's one of the things I think is hardest for designers who may not be totally business facing is, I was working in an agency before I went freelance the first time. So literally someone else was doing the pricing. I didn't even see it except by accident once. And so when I first went freelance, that was kind of my guide. I was like, they're charging X dollars for me, so I'll just charge a little less than that to be competitive. And that was back when I was young and was terrified to charge anyone money. And then as I got older, I heard this piece of advice. I forget who gave it to me, and they said, if you don't laugh a little to yourself when you're charging too little. Like that should be your metric, is like, okay, this is like a ridiculous sum. And then it's like, that's probably around the right level. It is funny because even after years of freelancing, you would talk to some clients and say like, this sum, I'll give you a little off because you're, younger or something. And they're like, that's the most ridiculous sum I've ever heard. And then other clients, you charge them, you're like, you do the same thing where you're like, I'm a little busy or something. And so I'm just gonna charge you a little extra, see if it's really worth your time. And then they'll come back and be like, sure. And so there's really no predictable things. People are people, I think. It certainly doesn't hurt to be a good salesman if you're freelancing, but I don't think you necessarily need that. I know a lot of people who are just really good at their craft, come in, do their project, say as little to the client as they can, and they leave, and the client's like, wow, that was amazing. And then she's like, that's just what I do. But like, you can be any type, but it definitely helps. It's not gonna hurt you to be good with people. To promote myself, I was relying pretty much entirely on word of mouth and friends of friends. There was a big difference from when I first went freelance and I didn't know anybody to the jobs I was able to get after I'd been in the industry for a while, worked at a couple full-time companies. There were a lot of people who had left and were starting other startups, or friends of friends who were starting startups. So that was like the easiest way to get work. There were still a couple of people who'd come in through my website, but it tended to be the projects that I was interested in were friends of friends. I think Twitter was probably a pretty big platform for me. Just people who had been following me for a while and were interested in working with me, or who just found me through there. But honestly, I did not get a lot of work through Dribbble or Behance. I haven't sat down and been like, all right, let me figure out my Dribbble platform and everything and get that going. It was just like another thing I didn't really have time for, even though I knew a lot of people were getting work through there. But I just was like one more platform to manage. It's funny because in terms of isolation, I'm, I guess, fortunate in a freelance setting where I'm very introverted, so I could look up. If I didn't have my dog, I probably wouldn't have left the house for weeks. But it is a good question of how to stay in touch and keep growing and stay in tune with the network and everything. I have a couple of freelance friends who I would go out to lunch with. We'd kind of talk shop, maybe like co-work from their office. And for some of my clients, I would go in and work a couple days a week, just so we could really work closely with the team and everything. I think you can freelance anywhere, but I think there's definitely an advantage to being in San Francisco, just the density of work available. It's pretty easy comparatively to get work. I can imagine it being a lot harder if everyone isn't. Here it's like everyone is like, I need a designer right now. Like, do you know anyone? So I get a lot of emails even now that I'm full-time of people being like, do you know anyone who's still freelance? We need somebody like yesterday. When I first went freelance this time around, I was convinced. I was like, this is it. This is the end. Never going to have another job. I think what made me move from freelance to full-time was that I had this realization that full-time, if you play it right, is basically having one client. And a lot of my art projects that I was just figuring out and just starting when I was freelancing were starting to pick up. You know, things were starting to have a life of their own. I felt a lot of direction on where I was going, where I was getting a lot of creative fulfillment out of freelancing. And nowadays feels more like I'm getting creative fulfillment out of my art and my projects. And so it felt more like I should be dialing back the client work to do my best creative work as art and so on. So cutting down to basically my job right now, it's like I have one team that I work with, the paycheck comes in, so that's nice, and all the taxes are already taken out. And yeah, I just get to do my art stuff without thinking about it. And then working with a team I know is reliable, is good to work with. There's no context switching, which is kind of nice. I think if it calls to you, if freelance calls to you, you have to try it at least once, just because you don't want to always wonder. The worst thing that can happen is you just don't like it, and you can just get another job, and that's fine, but you won't always have this fantasy of, I don't know, maybe you want to have the fantasy of freelance just dangling lightly in front of your face forever, but yeah, I think it's a good mystery to plumb if you're curious.
Hey everybody, it's Dan here, and thank you so much for watching this episode of Freelance TV. I really hope you enjoyed it. If you did, give it a like below, join the conversation, leave a comment below, and of course, if you want to see more of these videos, subscribe. Now, you can also go to freelance.tv for more information, to see full transcripts of these videos, or just to join our freelance community. If you have any questions at all, if you don't follow along my upcoming documentary I'm filming on freelance, on Twitter and Instagram, I'm @Dan Petty. That's all I've got for now. Thank you again for watching this episode. We'll see you next time.